if I bleed tonight, if I am sad tonight, I don't have a job to find. And if I work tonight, if I'm so tired tonight, I'll fall asleep when I'm home, when I'm home. I was just so far from here, focused on my own way, with never looking back to those who lived in fear. There was nothing I could do, there was nothing you said that could make me realize how much left.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this special Around the Ropes with Jon and Jeff. And we say it's special for a reason. Before I get to that, Jeff, how you doing on this Thursday evening?
Happy Pride Month. Peace, everyone. I'm doing good. How are you, John?
Doing very well. Now, guys, our guest we have on tonight, you can consider him on the Mount Rushmore of referees. This is a guy who's been there. He's been in WWE. He's been at the top of the top. But this is also a guy who's had a lot of moments. And you guys know him. You guys see him on Reffing It Up on YouTube, and also when he does his minute-long posts on Twitter. The legend himself, the one, the only, Jimmy Korderas joins the show. Jimmy, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing, especially after that introduction, I'm doing great, man. I got to hire you guys or something. I don't know.
But
we appreciate you coming on, Jimmy. Yeah.
No, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Before we get into, obviously, you were in WWE for a number of years. Before we get into that, what got you into pro wrestling?
I just gravitated towards it when I was a kid. We used to have so much of it on television here in Toronto. I mean, it was on all day long on Saturday. You know, my parents used to bug the living you-know-what out of me. Go outside and play or something. I said, no, wrestling's on, because we got so much of it. It was like we had, here in Canada, Maple Leaf Wrestling, of course, was the staple with the Tunnies. You know, Jack Tunney, of course, people remember as President Jack Tunney. But his uncle Frank was the one who was the man in charge. But we got WWF Wrestling from an affiliate from Buffalo Station. We also got Mid-Atlantic Wrestling from a Buffalo affiliate. We got AWA Wrestling on one channel, Calgary Stampede Wrestling on another. I mean, International Wrestling from Montreal, stuff from Vancouver. It was just all day long. And so,
it's quite the experience you got there.
Yeah.
You're talking about quite the sphere of influence you got growing up.
Yeah, and then when I was a youngster, I want to say about 8 or 9 years old, my next door neighbor, who's my best friend, Billy Kufis, his dad got tickets for us to go to Varsity Stadium here in Toronto to see Dory Funk Jr. defend the NWA championship against the original Sheik, Eddie Farhat from Detroit. And first time I saw it live, that's it. You know, if I wasn't hooked before, man, you landed me in the boat.
Now, when you became a wrestling fan, did you have dreams of becoming a pro wrestler, or was it a referee? Or how did you become the referee?
Well, when I was old enough to go down to Maple Leaf Gardens on my own, and I used to have what was the equivalent of seasons tickets, I talked to the office and said, listen, I come to every show. Can I get the same seats all the time, as close to the ring as possible? So I had second row ringside, right beside the entrance ramp, where they used to enter at Maple Leaf Gardens. Excuse me. And watching it that close, I knew I always had this thought in my mind. Maybe I wouldn't mind trying this. And the closer I sat and paid attention, I thought, I don't think I can do this. You know what I mean? I learned early on that, it takes a special kind of talent for someone to be able to do something like that, and a special kind of pain tolerance. So I thought, maybe that's not for me, but I want to do something. I want to get involved in the wrestling business in some form or fashion. I wasn't thinking referee at the time or anything like that. I just wanted to be a part of it in some form or fashion.
Jeff?
So you started with the Tunney organization. Jack Tunney, to me, will always be the president of the WWE. That's who was president when I first became a fan.
Mm-hmm.
So you knew when you saw him on TV, it was going to be a very serious statement. or he was going to strip somebody of the title or announce a big WrestleMania matchup or a big Tuesday in Texas matchup. You just knew that it was going to be something special. You got to work with him though long before that.
Right.
And so what was that like kind of that transition from what we would call like a territory to going into like kind of the WWE, WWF at the time, which had its own territory? What was that transition like for you? Like kind of how did you go from one to the other?
For me, it wasn't much of a transition. I think the bigger transition was for someone like Jack and for people who, his cousin Eddie, who was Frank's son. See, Frank Tunney passed the business down to Eddie used to look after the finances. Jack looked after the business of wrestling, if that makes sense. And like I said, for me, it wasn't much of a transition. It was more the office that had to, I guess, had to relinquish some form of control because WWE went in and bought out the territory. So Jack was still running the Toronto territory, the Ontario territory, but even though he was kind of in charge, there was still somebody above him, and that was Vince. So Vince really ran the territory. Jack was just responsible for making sure everything happens the way it's supposed to happen.
So how do you go from a fan at the second row seat to referee?
Wow. Okay. Trying to make a long story short, one of my hobbies when I used to go as a fan was take pictures. And I would sit second row ringside, like I said, snap pictures. And this was back when you had to actually take your film in to get developed. A lot of people,
And that's a camera for younger John there.
It's an actual camera where you have to actually load film into it. And I would get the film developed at this place that used to double your prints for $1. So I would keep one set for myself, and I'd take the other set with me to the next show and sell them for $2 a picture, which would help fuel my wrestling habit. Pay for my tickets, pay for my whatever. And the guy that worked for Jack Tunney, who took the pictures for the program and for the magazine, I didn't know who he was, but he came up and he actually caught me selling the pictures outside Maple Leaf Gardens. Says, you can't do this. And he read the riot act about being copyright infringement and all this. And I went, oh boy, I'm going to lose my wrestling. Not I'm going to jail or I'm getting arrested. I'm going to lose my wrestling tickets. That was the first thing I was concerned about. I can't lose my wrestling tickets. But he said, you don't seem like a bad guy. You know what? You take pretty good pictures. Let me talk to Jack and maybe I could bring you on as a, help me out taking pictures at ringside. And I thought this was cool. So he introduced me to Jack, and Jack said, well, we don't want it. I don't need another photographer. We'll find something for the kid to do. And that's when I was doing all the whatever needed to be done, errands and go do this and take care of that. And it throws me the keys to his Cadillac and says, go pick up so-and-so from the airport and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, whatever you need. And after about a little over a year of that, Pat Patterson, who I became close to, because Pat's a great guy. I got along great with Pat. And he says to Jack, Jack, we got the kid over here. He's like running around. He's running all these errands. During the show, he's just sitting watching, waiting for something to do. He says, why don't we use him? We'll make him a referee. And Jack says to him, well, Pat, do you want to smarten the kid up? And Pat says, well, Jack, he's in the locker room sitting with the boys hanging out. I think he's kind of knows what's going on. So he told me to get black pants, black sneakers, a blue shirt, and a black bow tie, and to carry it with me at all times. And that was it. That was the genesis of how I became a referee.
Now, the first match you ref, for people who may not know, wasn't it SD Jones against, I don't remember who the other individual was.
It was the Red Demon, who wrestled under a mask that night it was Jose Luis Rivera who wrestled under a mask as the Red Demon. And that was in early 1987. Wow. Every time I say it, I go, wow.
Jimmy, if it's any consolation, I've actually been a fan of yours pretty much my entire wrestling. I've been there watching you since the late 80s, all the way through. So, I mean, I know what you mean when you say 1987. Like, It doesn't feel like that long ago because that's right about when I got into wrestling.
Mhm.
But yet that was forever and a day ago and before John was even born there. So
But Jimmy, I know you had, if I remember correctly, your first WrestleMania was WrestleMania 5, correct? Or
No,
WrestleMania
actually,
4.
4. Yes, 4. They're both Atlantic City, so that's okay.
Now, I read something that you were legitimately knocked out by
Yep.
Jimmy Hart's. Can you just take us through that moment as far as what you still remember from that?
I got legit knocked out, but it wasn't Jimmy Hart's megaphone. I did it to myself. It was basically when Jimmy Hart waffled me from behind with the megaphone. Went to face plant, and it was right by the ropes there near the edge of the ring. So when I put my hands down to face plant, my hand shot out and my chin hit the canvas, I guess in the sweet
ooh,
spot, and that's the last thing I remembered.
just
Lights out.
lights out.
Yep. And the guys who eventually came out to help me, were like, "What the heck?" I don't remember this. I just know what they were telling me, that, hey, they were trying to revive me. They were like, wake me up and help me to the back. And they were mad because they thought I was sandbagging them by dead weighting them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? They said, yeah, you weren't helping us. We had to pick you up and drag you. And I said, you did? And that's when they started to kind of lighten up and go, oh, you don't remember that? I said, no. He said, well, maybe he's telling the truth.
So that's your first concussion.
Right. Yes. That I know of.
Any more? I was going to say, you've taken your fair share of bumps over the years.
Hmm.
Ref bumps. It was notorious in the 90s. It was
Yes.
the big, every match or every show had to have a ref bump somewhere.
Hmm.
You and Earl probably took the most out of anybody.
Well, I
Right?
got to give some props to Jack Doan. Jack Doan was, in those days in the 90s, was taking his fair share. That's for sure. And he was
You
actually
all
taking,
were. You all were.
yeah, yeah.
But I bring up WrestleMania 4 because obviously that was the early days of WrestleMania.
Mhm.
And do you think if the early days of WrestleMania never panned out the way they did, that pro wrestling would be much different now?
Yeah, I think that was a big gamble. And because the gamble paid off, we have what we have today. Because what it did, WrestleMania incorporating the celebrities from outside of wrestling, excuse me, kind of legitimized it as a, you know, form of entertainment that others can appreciate. Like, it almost felt like back then you were a closet wrestling fan. You didn't want to let everybody know, hey, yeah, I'm a wrestling fan. You know what I mean? Because they look at you kind of weird with a side glance and go, oh, you like that stuff? You know what I mean? Now you're seeing people like Muhammad Ali. Now you're seeing people like Liberace, Cyndi Lauper, other stars that came into the mix, and people started paying attention and going, oh, well, if this is good enough for those celebrities, maybe I'm missing something here. And they gave it a chance. And you have personalities that connected with people, and then it took off from there. And that was I think, the genesis of the casual fan, which
Mm,
hardcore wrestling fans hate that term. But guess what? If it wasn't for the casual fan, we wouldn't be in the spot we are today.
yeah. Yeah.
Jeff,
I had the luxury of having an older brother who he was much older than me. So he was in the Navy, so he was around the country, and he would actually send me tapes from the other territories.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's how I got exposed to like Mid South and
Hmm.
what was going on down in Texas and what was happening out west.
Right.
Because living in Albany as I did growing up, it was all WWF at the time.
Hmm.
That's all was on TV. That's all we got exposed to. That's all we had. I didn't know anything else existed until my brother started sending me back the tapes, and
Right.
I started seeing just how big wrestling was in some other areas, especially Texas out west,
Mm-hmm.
and Mid South, right?
Hmm.
And it's funny to hear you mention you're from Toronto, and you mentioned international wrestling in Montreal, which is the
Hmm.
the next province over, and you
Right.
call that international wrestling. I always
Right.
get a crack at. I always get cracked up about that. Those two
Oh.
provinces going back and forth.
Well, they think they're international. They don't. At least some in Quebec don't consider themselves Canadian. They're Quebecois.
I'm going there tomorrow night or Saturday night for dinner, and trust
Oh, nice.
me, they are Quebecois. They are not Canadian. They're Quebecois, and it's.
But if you're going for dinner, they do know how to cook. I will give them that.
They Canadians in general, yes. So you talk about WrestleMania growing into this international kind of spectacle, and you talk about the early stars like Muhammad Ali and Cyndi Lauper, and nowadays we're finding that celebrities not only are being asked to be part of WrestleMania, like they want to be part. They're asking well in advance. They're asking, to be shown on TV. Like,
right.
How much has it grown? Watching that grow, and like, can you kind of describe some of that growth that you were there for? Yeah. And it kind of hit a bell curve there for a little while in the mid '90s, but
right.
Overall,
no. That you touched on a point there that's very, very accurate in the world of pro wrestling. Pro wrestling has been very cyclical. It has its peaks and its valleys of popularity. It goes through these stages, and right now we are in one hell of a stage. I mean, like, you look across the board, everybody. You know what they say: rising water lifts all ships. And that's what's happening right now. So that's a good sign. It's good for those who enjoy wrestling. But back in the 90s, there were those periods of lull where whether it was trying to find footing creatively, not connecting with the audience in ways they could be. There are so many different things contributing to those peaks and valleys. Like sometimes, wrestling is difficult in the sense that you have to provide your audience 52 weeks a year of original content and programming. There's no other entertainment entity out there that has that. Whether you're talking the sports world that has seasons, or even television shows that have seasons as well, where they'll have whatever it is, 16, 18, 20 episodes a season, then they go into repeats. Wrestling doesn't have that luxury. So it is a lot more difficult to keep your audience intrigued and invested in your product when you have to keep trying to come up with something different. Like, obviously old formulas can work, but you have to now add a little something else to this formula to make it not seem the same, if you know what I mean. And that's the biggest struggle right now that they have in wrestling. Pretty much everyone's seen it all. So what's left?
And that's funny because I was telling my wife, who just got into pro wrestling because of me, obviously. I try to equate it. I said, believe it or not, the storylines you're seeing today are the same storylines that happened maybe, like, say 20, 25 years ago, and then 20, 25 years before that. Like you said, it's very cyclical, as well as the storylines are very cyclical. You have your evil German wrestler, right? Hans Schmidt. Well, now it's,
Gunther,
right?
Yeah.
Gunther.
Yeah.
And who's actually one of my favorite wrestlers, performers right now. I love his work.
But it's interesting you brought him up, because I use him as an example because, like you said, we haven't seen a performer like Gunther in how long? He is so old school that there is a generation out there who have never seen that before. So to them,
Iron Sheik, right?
So to them, this is something new because they haven't seen it before.
Yeah.
So there's that circle of life, Simba. You know what I mean? I'm going to use this analogy. I've used it many times before, but I think this kind of explains how wrestling is wrestling is like the wheel. When it was invented, it was made of stone because that was the material of the day. Then it evolved. It became wood because wood is lighter and it's easier to transport things now. Then it became rubber. Then it became vulcanized rubber. Run flat tires, winter tires, summer tires, all season tires, all variations of the tire, of the wheel. But at the end of the day, the wheel is round. It has to stay round, or else it won't go forward. And that's the same things with wrestling. You can kind of add different elements to it to try and improve it to some form or fashion. But at the end of the day, if you don't keep the same basic shape, then you're lost. There's no moving forward.
Yeah.
I,
John?
I no, I totally get what you're saying, but there's now a part that I want to get to that
Mhm.
a lot of wrestling fans, have mixed emotions about, and we're just about to hit the 26. We just passed 26-year anniversary of Owen Hart's passing, and obviously, a lot of wrestling fans know you were supposed to be the referee for his match with Godfather the night when everything happened. And I know you've been asked this 100 times, but there's no other way I can ask this. Can you take us through what you remember from that night? Just everything from that night.
Uh, uh, Unfortunately, my recollection of that night, there's too much that I remember from that night, and there's other things that I just do not remember. Like I remember, like I said, being in the ring prior to the accident, clearing out some debris from the ring because they had a hardcore match prior to that. So they were playing a pre-tape interview on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives us time to clear out whatever was, you know, pieces of table, whatever was in there. So I was helping clear out, and I was kicking out some stuff, and I was holding the top rope with my left hand. And as I was moving towards a corner, this all happened in like a split second. I can't explain to you how quickly this all happened. I felt something brush by my side, and the top rope pulled out of my hand that I was holding and snapped back. And my instant reaction going through my head was, and I heard a loud bang. But to me, my first reaction was the top rope broke. It snapped. Because, in WWE, they use actual rope. They don't use the airline cable. So I looked, and, my first look around, and when I looked, I said, well, it's not the rope. The rope is there. Maybe it was the cables that hold the ring posts underneath. I was trying to think, and then I looked to my right, and there was Owen. He was laying there, face up, and I didn't process it. I didn't put two and two together. I couldn't, you know what I mean? It wasn't computing. I was lost. I was like, what the heck is going on here? And I went over and I called over a couple of times, and there was no response. And then I just started panicking, calling for help. And that's when King got up from the table, and he walked over, and then everybody started flooding the ring. And I just laid back and let the guys do their job,
Jimmy, we can hear the emotion change in your voice. We can hear how it's still unsettling to you all this time later. How you've been carrying this personally. And we had a show earlier this week about mental health. And one of the presenters, he treats veterans and first responders. And he used a line that, a lot of times we're told, being a first responder, that after tragedy or trauma or something like that, we're told to just man up and move on.
Right.
You guys were told to keep the show going. I can't imagine what that was like for you and the boys and the women in the locker room.
I wasn't there when that call was made, because they had me go get checked out to make sure I was okay, because they saw that I was, not in a good place. So they kind of forced me to go get checked out. So I wasn't there, and I didn't know that the show continued until the next day. Because afterwards, they took me to get checked out. After I got checked out, I was at the same hospital that Owen was at, and nurse came in and said, "Okay, you're cleared to go." And I asked about my friend. I said, "Is my friend okay?" They brought him in. They said, "Are you with that wrestling fella?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I'm sorry to tell you, he's passed away." And I broke down, and I called my then fiance at the time, and I was, talking to her, and to this day, I don't remember. After speaking with her, I don't remember going from Kansas City to St. Louis for Raw the next day. I don't remember that time period afterwards. I don't remember if we drove, flew, took the crew, but it's a blur. I just don't know what happened. And then the next day is when, you just saw it in everybody. It was just everybody was, everybody. I hate when everybody speaks well of somebody after they've passed, but not that I hate that. I mean, it's nice that they do, but with Owen, it was genuine because there is nobody on this planet that could ever have a negative word to say about that man. And if I could be half the human being he was in my life, then I've accomplished a lot, and I'd be happy with that.
That show, that Monday Night Raw show, was one of the most beautiful wrestling shows ever produced because it was real.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the Godfather going out and offering to either have a match or let's drink one up for Owen and go to the back. I remember all the stars giving their testimony, and there wasn't a dry eye in any of their eyes. And to this day, even as we near 26, 27, 20, all this time later, people still talk about that, and they still talk about Owen in such reverence.
Yes.
We forget how great of a performer Owen was. Right?
It doesn't get talked about enough. I mean, I understand why people focus on the tragedy so much, but we also should remember, again, like I said, a wonderful guy. He was the kind of guy that uplifted everybody. If everybody's having a crappy day, because it happens, everybody, you have those days where everybody's in a grumpy mood or whatever. He just walk in the locker room and just put a look on his face and make everybody smile. That's the kind
I can only imagine what it was like dealing with him versus Brett, who's very serious and very stoic.
Yeah.
And then you have the notorious ribber and prankster and Owen. And they locked up at WrestleMania 10 and Owen wins.
Right.
John, I don't know how you feel, but I always felt that Owen was actually the better wrestler, although Brett got more credit for the work he did. I just felt that Owen was just, and maybe it was just his natural talent. Jimmy, do you have any input on that? Brett, Owen, Brett kind of thing.
Well, no one could discredit Brett's technical ability in the ring. Technically, he's about as sound as you can get. Owen was able to take that technical aspect and also add that entertainment aspect to it. And again, no disrespect to Brett, but he had that one up on Brett where he was able to do the sports entertainment. I'm doing the air quotes if anybody's not seeing me here. The sports entertainment part of pro wrestling, and you can come at me. Wrestling is sports entertainment.
Yeah,
I know the diehards don't like that term, but it's accurate. It's exactly what it is. I used to look at it, and every time I heard it, I used to go, "Oh, come on." And then the more I thought of it, I said, "Well, you know what? Professional wrestling, is the term they use for many years, but pro wrestling is a form of sports entertainment." Yeah. You know what? When I watch the Super Bowl is a form of sports entertainment because there's so much hoopla around it.
Yeah.
Every major sporting event is pretty much sports entertainment now.
No, I completely agree. I look at it this way as far as with Owen, because I was younger towards the end of Owen's time. I've always said this, going back, looking at it now, one of my favorite WrestleMania matches, Jeff, was the match you just mentioned. Him versus Brett at WrestleMania 10.
It's one of the top 10 WrestleMania matches of all time, in my opinion.
Yep. And the greatest opening match of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, the story it told, Owen started. Did he start at WrestleMania 4, Jimmy, or he started with you guys right around that time, right?
Yeah. I wish I could tell you exactly when, but
it was right
some of that
around.
Stuff, yeah, some of that stuff is foggy. There are some great historians out there. I'm not one of them because I have forgotten more than I remember. Let's put it that way.
but he did start back in 3 or 4
Mm-hmm.
as the Blue Blazer,
Mm-hmm.
and then before moving on as Owen Hart, the new Hart Foundation and all
Right.
that. But he was just one of the performers that you got to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Who were some of the other, maybe a Mount Rushmore gets overused, but like your book has a picture of Edge and the Undertaker on it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of two more entertainers than those two in terms of
Right.
like who I would love to see wrestle. And you got to, there you are holding the belt.
Right. Those
So
are definitely two of them. See, it's tough to pick a Mount Rushmore because mine would be kind of biased for me. You know what I mean? Like I said, you pick two guys right there that would probably be on there. Um, I would probably put Eddie on there, Eddie Guerrero,
Eddie Guerrero.
because again, here's another guy who was so complete in everything he did, and it wasn't just him. Anybody he was in the ring with, he was able to make them look that much better. As good as the other guys were, Eddie was able to elevate other guys. And wow, if I had to pick,
Did you
mm,
ref you got to ref some of those matches on SmackDown?
oh yeah,
Did you ever break character? Did Eddie ever make you break character with some of his antics or some of the cheat, the lying, cheat, and steal, whatever aspect of?
I've had to bite my lip more than once. It's it's just because he does those facial expressions too. You just want to crack up, but at the same time, you got to keep remembering. Okay, I'm on TV here. I can't start laughing because I don't want to hear it from the boss when I get to the back. Why the hell did you crack up over there? Yeah, you know what I mean. So
One other thing I want to get to: Unforgiven '99.
mm-hmm.
There was the strike of the
Yep.
referees, and I actually just saw this clip earlier today. That's why I'm bringing this up. Was it your idea to go against them, or was that the office's idea? Just take us through like how that whole thing happened, where we saw the infamous moment of all the referees attacking you, and then Steve Austin coming down to
Right.
kind of help you get back into the ring.
Well, it was kind of my idea, but accidentally. It was one of those deals where I had just gotten married, and I had asked the office. I talked to JR is great. I love JR. If I could have a couple of weeks off for my honeymoon. So went on my honeymoon. And while I was gone, they ran that angle where the referees went on strike because they were being abused and whatever. But I didn't know this was going on because, like I said, I was on my honeymoon and I wanted to stay married. So I wasn't watching any wrestling. I wasn't paying attention to what was going on. And when I got back, all the jokes started. Hey, Jimmy, welcome back. Haha, you're on strike. Too bad you're out of a job. And it was funny. And then Hunter walks in. He goes, "Hey, Jimmy, welcome back. How was the honeymoon? Too bad you're out of a job, though." Ha ha. I said, "Hunter, I can't afford to go on strike. I just got married." And he laughed. He went, "Ha, oh, come with me." And I went, "What?" I thought he was mad, right? So he takes me. He says, "Hey, JR, Korderas here had a great idea," and I'm thinking, "I did." Says he'll be the only regular referee that crosses the picket line. He becomes a scab ref like everybody else. Okay, so then that's how it became. That's how it came to be. So just an offhanded a comment, like I was trying to make a funny joke, and it sparked something in his head that said, "Okay, this can work as something." Yeah.
Are there any other instances where you could think of where just that something that you said or just a by chance accident or that kind of sparked further storylines or further effects down the line of an existing storyline? Or
couple quick ones right here. I'll tell you when Kurt Hennig first started his Mr. Perfect character.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. Great. I love Kurt. Yeah. God bless him. When he was starting the character, he came up with the fisherman suplex as his finish. And then one day, this was happening in Maple Leaf Gardens as well. I'm watching the match and I'm standing beside Jack Lanza watching the match. Match is over. Kurt comes through the curtain and Jack says to Kurt, he says, "Kurt, Vince loves the character, loves your finish. He says, you got to come up with a cool name for that finish." So I said, I don't know why. I just I said, "Jack, do you mind if I make a suggestion?" He says, "Sure. What do you got?" I said, "How does Perfect Plex sound?" And he looks over, he goes, Kurt, we just got the name for your finish.
Like,
And I was like, it wasn't like I
Holy
was
cow.
thinking, it just popped.
I didn't know. I knew a lot of your stories. I did not know you were the one that came up with that.
Yeah.
Because Mr. Perfect and Rick Rude are two of my favorites of all time. And you coming up with that name, like that's
Oh, he thanked me
wow.
forever for it. He thanked me forever for it. He never forgot it, which was nice. And one other thing,
he executed that perfectly too. I mean, he
oh
was
yeah,
good.
oh yeah.
He
Again,
was good.
another one who doesn't get enough mention when you talk about greats in the past. He just, again, everything looks so smooth for him.
Oh
And
yeah.
one other quick one was, do you remember the supermarket brawl, the infamous supermarket brawl with
Of course, Booker T
Booker?
and
Yeah,
Stone Cold.
yeah. So at the end of that, when Booker T's all covered with flour and milk and whatever else, and and Stone Cold puts him on the conveyor belt and then gives him a few more shots, and he's walking out. I'm standing beside Paul Heyman, who is, you know, had a creative on SmackDown at the time, and we're watching this on the monitor in the back because it was pre-recorded earlier in the day, and we're laughing our butts off. This was hilarious stuff. So as Steve is walking out, I do my worst Steve Austin voice as he's walking out and just go, "Price check on a jackass." Huh. And Heyman looks at me and goes, "What'd you say?" And he looked mad. And I'm like, "What?" He said, "What'd you say?" I said, "Price check on a jackass." He looks at, he's like, he says, "Why were you not in the meeting?" And then he stormed off. And I'm like, was he mad at me or something? This was when SmackDown wasn't live. It was pre-recorded on Tuesdays, and they used to air on Thursdays, I believe it was at the time. So when I'm watching it back on Thursday, they VO'd the line in from Steve, "Price check on a jackass." That wasn't in the original one. So when we got the TV the next time, I look at Paul, I said, "What's up with that?" He says, "Yeah, we use the line. Thank you." I said, "Oh, no residuals over here? What the hell?" No bonus
credit,
in the
yeah.
no bonus in the check. What's going on?
So you name one of the best finishers of all time, and you're part of one of the most memorable storylines of the Attitude Era, and you get a referee shirt to show for it.
Yes, yeah,
right.
Handshake and a hot dog. There you go.
now, obviously, you were involved a lot with the Attitude Era, and people talk now that they think wrestling now is better than it was back then. As somebody who went through that era, I don't know if you'd be a little bit biased with this answer, but do you think that era still reigns supreme over what we're dealing with now, or is this era kind of neck and neck?
They both have their value. I mean, it's hard. Like you said, I'm a little biased to that era because I lived it, and was very much attached to it. So of course I'm going to view it a little differently than someone, who's actually watching from both eras. But the more I watch today, I do like elements of today. There's some stuff that I think they try to stretch too far a little bit at times, especially now because there's so much of it on television. Like I said, it's hard to write 52 weeks a year of original programming, but when you have to do 3 different shows with,
3 different shows plus a monthly PLE,
yeah,
plus the big 4,
mm-hmm.
That's a lot of work for the talent, the office, you guys,
mm-hmm.
everybody involved, right?
Absolutely. And things change regardless whether it's due to unfortunate accidents that happen where someone gets sidelined for a little while. As we saw recently, contracts that come up and they don't renew for whatever reason. So sometimes stories right in the middle of it get changed. So just what natural part of the business. It happens.
Jeff?
John, you had a great question for Jimmy, and do you want to ask it? If you can't remember it,
you ask the next one.
John, you're getting old, John. Sorry. Jimmy, let's take a hypothetical. Who, if you could ref any match between any 2 people nowadays, given all your history, take any 2 stars, who would you want to ref against? Who would you want to work with? who would you want to, and they could be current or former stars, but
Mhm.
who would you want to work with? That you never really, maybe you never had the chance to, or maybe you want to work with again.
Ooh. One guy I would love to work with again is Randy Orton.
Why?
Because he's still active, and he, in my mind, and of course this ruffles a lot of feathers too, in my mind, he is the most complete wrestler on the planet. Because a lot of people mistake a good wrestler and a good worker. There's a big difference between the two. A good wrestler is good at moves and doing moves in the ring. A good worker is not only good at doing moves in the ring, but also good at telling stories, using psychology, and getting people invested in them as a personality, as opposed to just, uh, getting people to pop for moves, if you know what I mean. They tell great stories in the ring.
And that's something Randy actually has possessed since he was 20 years old.
Yeah.
When he first broke in on the big screen,
Mhm.
You could just tell the way he walked to the ring with Evolution, the way he carried himself. He just had it.
Right.
Whatever you're describing, he had it.
Mhm.
And watching him just continue to grow and continue to improve every year,
Right.
just watching him at WrestleMania this past couple months ago made me realize just how far he's come in the business.
Mhm.
Since he was a kid, really, right?
Yep. Amazing. He's an amazing talent. And if I could pick one that I never got to work a match of his, it would have to be Sting. I would have loved to have worked a Sting match.
Now, I got a couple last questions for you.
Okay.
Obviously, when we see the referee in the ring,
Mhm.
they're always wearing an earpiece.
Yeah.
I know that's not. Can you take us through like what you're hearing in that earpiece?
Okay. Well, when they first started with the IFBs, as they call them, they were there initially to get times from the gorilla position so that the talent knows how far along they are in the match and how much time they have left. That was the intent of it originally. It morphed into a lot more communication because a lot of times the agent for the match would get on the darn mic and start giving you instructions. Tell them this, tell them to do that, tell them to do this, tell them to hurry up, tell them. I'm like, okay, now
Ever want
I'm.
to just rip it out?
Oh, there have been times. Yeah, oh yeah. But the thing is, and sometimes they forget that if you get the odd, like a time cue, I have to creatively find a way to go past that time on to the talent without making it overtly obvious that I'm passing a time cue. Because I see that sometimes nowadays and I go, oh my God, can you please not make it so obvious? You can tell them, they just walk up and they just go 4 minutes. And I'm like, okay, make it
Yeah,
look like you're,
they're not yelling in the corner like you used
or
to,
even
or
look like you're
you know,
giving instructions,
yeah,
something, no eye poke or something, no eye poke, 2 minutes to go, whatever. You know what I
yeah.
mean? But,
Yeah,
sometimes it was like, oh boy, please, please stop.
yeah,
Who took the better bumps, you or Earl?
Uh, Man. I hate to throw one of my old mentors under the bus, but sorry, Earl, got you beat.
What
You took
what was one of your? If you can name like 2 or 3 favorite cities that you refed in, what would it be?
Obviously, you got to pick your hometown. For
Toronto.
me, yeah, Toronto's got to be in there. My hometown. Oh boy, favorite cities. Uh, I gotta say I liked Philly. They were nuts. They were just
Philly boos, they boo the good guy down there. They
yeah,
are a heel town, and
right.
they are proud of it.
I know. And Jerry Lawler used to call Toronto Bizarro World. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was they were rabid though. And as far as another, if I had to pick one more town, Hmm. I'm sticking to North America here because in Europe it's different because they don't get it as often.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you're talking about cities that get it a lot, I like Dallas. I like working in Texas because uh, again it was the South and they more bought into everything. Like you said,
Yes.
in
Yeah.
Philly they would cheer the heels and boo the baby faces. It was almost like in Texas they all played along. It made it feel like it was supposed to feel, if that makes any sense.
Well, they were part of the Von Erich family down there,
Right.
and it was life to them down
Uh-huh.
there.
Hmm.
Wrestling was life,
Yes.
and you still get that feel for when you watch it on TV.
Hmm.
You talk about wrestling going to Europe just a few weeks ago. Look at how loud that those crowds were over there, and how
Yeah.
passionate they are.
Hmm.
So wrestling has never been more popular, but John and I always talk about it's never been more expensive either for
True.
the casual fan.
Right.
It's tough to go to. I was at the '92 Royal Rumble when Ric Flair won,
Hmm.
and I was also at last year's Rumble, and the price difference was staggering, not even counting inflation.
Right.
So
Yeah.
wrestling is. Are you happy with the direction it's headed under the TKO banner? When I say wrestling, I mean WWE.
Um,
Uh,
from a creative standpoint, I'm fine with it. I'm just worried that they're going to uh, price themselves out of the market. I mean, like, I get riding the wave while it's hot. This is almost like the Taylor Swift effect. I mean, if you can afford, if people are still paying those incredible prices for the tickets that they're paying now, as a business, as a company, as a corporation, I understand. But you also have to be careful that you don't, you know, it, see, and it's a hard situation because if you start clawing back on the prices, it's almost like you're telling investors now that, hey,
yeah.
it's that rough balance between the business side of the business. So I'm just worried that
It's
they're putting
it's
themselves, behind under a hard rock. You know what I mean?
it's tough, Jimmy, because like just in a few weeks, Raw is going to be right up here in Montreal,
Hmm.
and Montreal is only a 45-minute drive from my house.
Right.
So I looked up tickets, and they're 100, way all the way up in the top,
Mm.
$140 Canadian.
Right. Well,
That's
that's
a
only
lot
like
of money.
$20 US. So
That's still 65 bucks, 70
no,
bucks, 80 bucks,
right.
American. And for the top row for a Raw,
Right.
that's what John and I are always concerned about is, uh, and it's not, we see this not just in wrestling either. You mentioned the Super Bowl earlier, sports entertainment,
Hmm.
baseball's the same way.
Yep.
Even the Blue Jays, I'm sorry to mention,
Mm.
are very corporate, and you see this that sports in general have really glommed onto the corporate side of things and the corporate sponsorships, and they're
Right.
kind of pricing out the middleman, the
Hmm.
common fan.
Right.
But like you said, when you're speaking to investors, where's that common ground there?
Right. You got to find that balance, and everything now is their corporate bottom line. Where are
Yeah,
we with the bottom line? They're looking at a ledger. They're not looking at you know what is one of those sites that tells you. Um, they're not like looking for Google star ratings. They want to, you know what I mean? They're looking at the
yeah,
bottom line.
yeah, correct.
One, I have two other questions. Obviously, what we do, wrestling talk. Have you seen? And I'm mentioning this because obviously with Busted Open, obviously the show that Jimmy you know quite well.
Mm-hmm.
Dave mentions you quite often. Obviously, they announced today that they're now going to be 24/7. Do you think we're seeing a boom now in almost like wrestling talk radio, almost a little bit? If that makes sense.
No, no, it does make sense because you take a show like Busted Open that started off as a 1 hour weekly program that became a 1 hour daily program. Then it became 3 hours a day for 5 days, and then it's gone to where it's going to be, July 1st, 2025. I almost said 1925. Whoa. But here, 2025, July 1st, 2025, they go as a 24/7 all wrestling talk channel. And if you'd have told me that back when I began, I would have told you I got some swampland for sale in New Jersey for you. You know what I mean? Like,
Because again, that was back when, even as a child,
mhm.
I was mocked for being a wrestling fan. You talked about that in hushed tones,
Right,
being a wrestling fan back in the 80s, even with
right,
the celebrities that were at WrestleMania. It
right,
wasn't until the very beginning of the Attitude Era that it was okay to like talk about
right.
on the playground. And then next thing you know, everybody's wearing the DX shirts, the NWO shirts, like they've been following
Now,
all along. And it's like,
now it becomes cool. It's kind of like
yeah, where
wearing,
have you been my whole life here?
yeah, it's kind of like wearing an Aussie shirt now, or
Yeah.
a Kiss shirt, or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? So, uh, it's funny. I'm happy for Dave. He's passionate about what he does, man. And he put together a good crew there, and I think they're going to be just fine.
Well, I've always made the comment because we started this show about 4 years ago.
Mhm.
This year's be 4 years for Around the Ropes. And I've actually said this to Dave. I had the opportunity to see Dave last year when he got inducted up in the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame
Okay.
up in Albany. And I said to him, because I've always been into radio, but I've always said if it wasn't for Busted Open, for making wrestling talk cool,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there would be Around the Ropes. And
Yeah, you're right. Or a lot of others
yeah,
who are venturing into this platform.
yeah, and I said it to him, and I mean, Dave, he was so thankful that I said it. I was like, it's
Mhm.
true. I'm like, if you guys never made Busted Open the way it did,
Right.
and what it's become, I wouldn't be sitting here every week. I mean, we'd be sitting here now basically every week, except for if there's like holidays or something comes
Right.
up, week in and week out, putting the show together. Because I'm like, yes, I don't want to be Busted Open 2.0. I want to be the first Around the Ropes. But a
Mhm.
lot of inspiration for this show and how I construct it is from Busted Open.
Right. No, that's a good point. And just what you said there applies not only to the wrestling media aspect of things, but also to wrestling as well. Because there's that old argument. Well, we want to be different from WWE, which is fine. If you want to be an alternative, that's cool. But there are elements you can take with you from that product, from that presentation, because right now, I get a lot of flack for being hard on AEW from a lot of people online. And I understand why they would, but they don't understand why I'm saying what I say. And they said, you're not as hard on WWE. I do critique WWE, but I'm a little harder on AEW because when you look at the dynamic now, who's the one that needs help to elevate their game?
AEW.
So why would I go full bore on the guys who are already miles ahead? They're doing fine. They don't need, if they want to listen, they could listen. If they don't, they don't. These guys here, a lot of veterans are trying to offer constructive criticism to help them, but they're finding it, they're not looking at it as constructive criticism. They think that they're the old guys screaming at clouds and they're bashing them. It's not bashing. You know what I mean? It's meant to say, hey guys, at least here's an idea. Instead of doing this, why don't you do this? Find a different path, find a different way to present things that would, help, and stop catering to a niche audience.
I'll
Like, I'll give you an example. This just in the last couple of days, I talked about. Did you guys watch Dynamite on Wednesday night?
Yes, I did.
Okay, the Okada Ibushi angle setup. There are those who understand that they had a history in New Japan. That's fine. I get that. They talked about it. I know Excalibur talked about it, whatever the case may be. They're setting up a match for them next week. So what happens? Okada comes to the ring after Ibushi's match, doesn't say a word, puts his forehead against his forehead, doesn't say a word, turns his back and walks out. And we're supposed to say, well, the reason they're having this match is because Ibushi is Omega's best friend. And after what Okada did to him last week, he's exacting revenge. Now, if it was my best friend and you came to the ring, and especially if you put your forehead against mine, what was the first reaction?
We're going at it. We're going to blows, right?
Yes, it's on. It made Ibushi look like a punk, and it did nothing for either one of them. And then once he walks out of the ring, right away, it's like, oh, we got word from Tony Khan in the back that they're going to have a match next week. You didn't give anything a chance to breathe, and you gave me no other reason other than, oh, well, these guys used to tag in the back a couple of years ago, and it's just having a match for the sake of having a match, in my opinion, because you're not giving me enough reasons to see this match other than, yeah, these guys are going to kill it next week. Yeah, okay, why? Give me a reason.
Jimmy, that's the one thing, like I said, we've been doing the show now for 4 years. That's the biggest thing I have said about AEW is, as a fan, and I've always said, I'm always going to be a fan at heart. Mm-hmm. I'm never going to sit there and say that, oh, I'm an in-ring competitor or I'm in the business. Mm-hmm. That I'm a fan. And from a fan's perspective, I've always said the comment of, half the time I can't watch AEW because it's okay. We're going to take person A, person B, put them in the match, but we're not going to tell a story. We're not going to give the fans a reason to be emotionally invested in it. That I sit there. I mean, Jeff and I have had this discussion. We don't even talk AEW on the show anymore because there's so many times where, like, I'll be watching AEW, trying to figure out what we're going to talk about for the next show, and I'll turn around and go, there's nothing to talk about. I know, they have All In coming up in a couple of weeks and all that stuff. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, how can I talk about this company being truthful? Because that's been my whole thing, is I try to be a truthful fan about things. And when I'm sitting there, I'm watching AEW and I'm watching this stuff and I'm like, what are we doing here? I'm like, so I totally get what you're saying. That's been the biggest thing I've been hitting on with them since day one.
No, it's an ongoing problem. It's part of it is it stems from the top. I hate to point fingers, but someone who is not taking advice that he could use. I mean, you've got some great minds there that could really help improve their on-air presentation. I mean, people say, well, they've only been around for 6 years, but 6 years in the television business, you should have little things like audio issues and that sort of thing already ironed out. And it's not that it never happens elsewhere. It just happens far too often. Like, I'll give you an example. Little thing like on Wednesday night, they opening the show with pyro, right? Cool effect. I like it. Look good. Excalibur's trying to talk while the pyro's going off, so you can't hear a darn word he's saying. Just don't say anything until the pyro's done, and then you could say, "Welcome to Dynamite," whatever the case may be. See, it's just those little things that make it. It doesn't look as professional as it should look.
I'll put it this way: you have guys in that company, and I don't want to, go into a whole thing about bashing AEW, but you have guys in that company who they always consider the big names, Okadas, the Mercedes Moné, Ospreay. Yet you look at the ratings, and I know we always talk about ratings when it comes to the IWC. How this company, half the time, doesn't hit 700,000 on regular ratings. I'm not talking about, with the addition of Max, because I know if you add Max into it, a lot of times they go over 1 million. But just regular TV, and they
also. So I not to cut you off, John, but so they say. I mean, nobody knows those numbers. Nobody has ever, given hard numbers at all. This is all pure conjecture and speculation, depending on who you listen to. Because even Tony Khan said in interviews, "Oh, I don't know the numbers, but I hear they're good." What does that mean? And ratings aren't the biggest indicator anymore, because yes, they do mean something to advertisers, but the biggest barometer to is your product doing well is how many people are there watching live.
Exactly, because how do you judge ratings on Netflix where Raw is nowadays? How are you going to judge ratings on Peacock where and as wrestling moves more towards streaming services,
Right.
and I see WWE moving more toward the Netflix side of things in
Oh
the
yeah.
future.
Oh yeah.
I'm rather excited to see that because it allows my children now, the next generation of fans, they aren't watching cable, they aren't watching TV, they're watching the streaming services. So now they have access to Raw.
Mm-hmm.
Back when I was growing up, if you didn't watch Raw on Monday nights, you weren't aware, and you were
Right.
made fun of the next day. Now
Yeah.
I can watch Raw. I could put on Monday Night's Raw right now and watch as many Raws as I want in a row. The past Raws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jimmy, my last question to you is you've kind of seen a star like John Cena from ruthless aggression all the way to today.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about his current storyline? I mean, I love it. I love the promo he got last week.
Mm-hmm.
I love the work he's doing. I just think he's telling a great story. What are your thoughts on the John Cena retirement angle?
I think for the most part, I like it. There are, of course, little blips on the radar, like in any other story. Sometimes they go up.
Mm-hmm.
But this whole notion that, oh, he hasn't had a good match since he's won the championship and stuff. There are two sides to that coin. I mean, as far as psychology goes in the matches, I think the one he had with Randy was the best one. That's why I'm a big
Mm-hmm.
Randy Orton fan, as you can tell. But what has been his mantra since he came back? I am here to ruin wrestling. So
Yeah.
if someone is going to ruin wrestling, would they have a quote unquote 5-star banger in the ring so everybody? No, you want to piss people off. You want them to be mad at you.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, this is in my opinion, I don't know for a fact, that it is intentionally designed to upset the internet wrestling community.
Well, of course,
It's,
yeah. You
it's
got your
almost
online trolls.
it's
Yeah.
almost like giving them a middle finger.
Yeah, and he's doing it. Metaphorically speaking, every week, every time that he gets on the mic, and he just reminds you, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm only here for 19 more appearances.
Right.
That's all you're getting with me in this belt, and then I
Mm-hmm.
am out." And he just keeps rubbing it in and rubbing it in and rubbing it in.
Mm-hmm.
And as a longtime fan, I'm just laughing and loving it, and I think it's some
Yeah.
of his best work, honestly.
I think so too. And you listen to his promos, like you said, especially the last Cena bomb, pipe bomb.
Yeah.
Incredible. I thought it was incredible. I thought it was
What
excellent.
was the last? Yeah, you haven't heard a promo like that since before he became champion, when he was Thug.
Mm.
The thugonomics.
Yeah, Doctor of Thugonomics. Yeah.
Yep.
Jimmy, my last question is: we were talking before about Mount Rushmore, and obviously when I brought you on,
Mhm.
I said you were in my eyes, Mount Rushmore of referees.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna put you on the spot right now, including yourself. Who would be the three of the referees would be on your Mount Rushmore?
Ooh, you're putting me on there?
Yeah,
Well, I give you 4 if I'm not on there. How's that?
all right, that's fine. Whatever.
Okay.
All right. I would put Tommy Young, who, if for anybody young enough out there who has never witnessed Tommy Young referee a match, I encourage you to go out and find some. Yeah, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Obviously, I would put both Hebners, Dave and Earl.
Ooh.
Yeah, I
You're
know
giving
that.
Dave.
Yeah. I put Dave on there. Dave was so helpful for me, and if it wasn't for other circumstances and him transitioning from a referee to a road agent, he would have been great having a Hebner on each show, because he used to run 2 house shows a night. If for the 4th spot, see, that's the tougher one.
Robinson.
He's in the conversation. I mean, him. Even another Hebner, Brian, would be in the conversation. Kyoto's in the conversation. But
Mike
again,
Chioda always gets overlooked. Yeah, he's another one that takes a bump every time.
Mm-hmm.
He could call a match in the ring.
Yeah.
I used to love watching him growing up too.
But Man, see the tough one. I'll throw myself in because I can't think of a fourth.
So, all right. I do have one more. I forgot about this story. I'll never
Okay.
forget this. This was let's see, 2001, 2002 ish. I was working behind the scenes as a EMT, and there was a live event, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and Earl came out, Earl Hebner,
Mm-hmm.
and he was the one in charge of buying beer that night for the boys.
Uh-oh.
Have you ever had to be in charge of buying beer for all the boys? And if so, how much was that tab?
You know what? I was never having to buy for the boys because I was on the ring crew as well. So I had to stay back and tear that ring down, and they weren't going to wait for their beer.
I
So
learned that with Earl. He was not. He was ready to. He was running to the car. Where do I get the beer? Where do I get the beer? In that
Right.
southern accent.
Right. Yeah. Guess what? They're not going to wait. So they're not going to wait for me to tear down that ring. They want somebody to go ASAP. So guess what? Earl, he got the duty that night. That's one of the advantages of being on the ring crew. You miss certain little things like that kind of save you a little money and actually make extra money because I got paid to do the ring crew as well. Separate pay.
I will say this, Jimmy. Obviously, we'll let you plug everything you have coming up in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said before, I've said this a lot. I've been doing the show now for 4 years, and we've had on a lot of big names. Barry Horowitz has been on the show. Brent Azar has been on the show. We actually had Mark Henry on the show.
Yep. Barry Horowitz.
Yeah.
But I actually said this to Jeff before you came on. Having you on tonight was our biggest guest we've ever had.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, our biggest guest we've ever had. And getting the chance to actually talk to you, I actually had a chance to talk to you at the Bus Open party down at the 2300
In Philly. Oh,
Yep.
yeah. Okay.
Yep. And just to get a chance to talk to you and, sit there going, wow, I'm talking to somebody who I remember watching growing up. It's an honor to have you on. It's a privilege. And before we let you go, what do you have coming up? Anything you want to plug? I know you have a book that just came out a number of years ago. So if you want to plug that, go right ahead. And anything else you want to plug, go right ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. That means a lot. Yeah, I have a book that's still out. Oh, somebody's at the door. I have a book that's still out there. It's called The 3 Count: My Life in Stripes as a WWE Referee, which is still available. You can go to Amazon and find that. Or if you find me at any appearance that I might be at, I probably got a few stashed in the trunk. So just ask me. And I may be able to coerce you into buying a copy, and I'll sign it for you. As far as where else you can find me on all my social media, at Jimmy Korderas I still call it Twitter, at Real Jimmy Korderas on Instagram. I have 2 shows that I do right now. I do Reffing It Up with Brian Hebner and Daniel Spencer, who is the lead official at TNA right now. I have to give a shout out to RJ. He's our producer. He holds the glue together. Without him, we're stuck. A bunch of old farts who can't figure out technology. And also, I do another show with a good buddy of mine, Donnie DeSilva from Toronto here. It's called Huge Pop Radio, Huge Pop, the Huge Pop Show. We have a lot of fun with that. You can find that at hugepopradio.com. And of course, my ref and rants on all my social media platforms. It's just a minute or so long, giving a little critique here and there. And as Uncle Bully used to say, just, in my opinion, trying to tighten screws that I believe need tightening. That's all it is. And it's not, everybody just be nice to each other. That's all.
Again, Jimmy, thank you so much for coming on. The door is open for you anytime you want to come back on. We'd love to have you back on again.
Well, thank you. We will be talking again. Thank you guys very much.
Absolutely. Guys,
Thank you, Jimmy.
Look at that. Triple J. Wow. Jon, Jeff, and Jimmy.
guys, the legend himself, Jimmy Korderas, and for Jeff, I'm John. We're out of here. We'll catch you guys next time. We're back Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific.